All right, now joining us on Tennis Channel Inside In. Always a pleasure. Second time talking to this person. So he's made the reoccurring guest feature, one of the premier writers that tennis has seen for a very long time. And coming up really soon, he's going to be inducted into the Northern California Tennis Hall of Fame, a well-deserved honor. You can find him on tennis.com. You can find him as a co-host of the 3 podcast. Joel Drucker, welcome back to Tennis Channel Inside In. It's been about a year, but welcome back to the show. Excited to talk to you.
Great, Mitch. Thanks for having me. It's a lot of fun. Always good talking with you.
So, yeah, I guess it's a good point to start. I want this to be an open-ended conversation, catch up on how things are going. How's your summer been? I mean, this is the part of the year where, the Grand Slam season is over. We can kind of catch our breath. Tennis doesn't stop, but how's the summer been involved in the game here?
It was great. I had a terrific time at Wimbledon and then on through the summer in the US Open. I think that a lot of, this year will be looked on as kind of a changing of the guard, since this is the first time since '02 that none of the big three has won a major. So obviously it signals something new in the game, very exciting. And I have fun watching it. I like seeing all the tennis just play out. It's very exciting.
Yeah, you're known as, and I mean this complimentary, of course, like a link to the past. You've covered the game. You're a true historian, and you brought up how this is a transformative year. So I guess the first thought on that was, do you review years and certain things like right away, or does it take time to really put something into its proper historical significance?
I think you have to do both. I think the more you do it, the more you can see it that way, because that's just kind of the way I see things, because I've seen taking in the whole tapestry of the game. So I'm able to see it that way. But it helps to do a little longer review, and rather than to just assess something in the immediate. I mean, I'm a big opponent of recency bias. I don't like people doing that and saying, "Oh my God, that's the greatest upset ever. This is the most incredible match." So I think it's important to kind of look a little more closely and see, is this indeed a year when things change? I mean, I think when there's something as obvious as none of the big three not winning a major for the first time in 22 years, that's, you don't exactly have to be the David McCullough to get that one.
It's a good reference. Yeah, the historical significance of it is one thing, and it definitely goes, it needs to be stated. But having covered tennis for so long, and some of us are spoiled, some of us are a little younger to realize it, but this is what does happen, right? There's always these boom periods, and then you're going to have kind of the reset, right? Like, it's not uncommon. There's always peaks and valleys in the history of tennis.
It's not a peak or a valley. It's not a boom or a recession. It's just a progression of victors. It's not like the big three not winning. It's not the stock market, and this signals the downturn in the tennis Dow Jones index. It just signals change. And the interesting thing is about this 22-year one, that's a significant gap, because those three have commanded so many majors for so long. Usually they're a little more subtle. I mean, for example, Pete Sampras may not win Wimbledon, and Leighton Hewitt may emerge, but other people are winning other slams. The tectonic plates are shifting a little bit more subtly across the landscape, as opposed to something as vivid as like, ba-boom, no big three has won a major. So this might be, in fact, okay, so this is the homework assignment for us. Okay. Is this the most obvious example of a significant shift in, let's say, the power construction of men's tennis? No big three, as opposed to other years where it's shifting and sliding, and here's Pete Sampras, and there's John McEnroe, and there's Ivan Lendl. Those things are a little bit more subtle, but this is like a definitive break in the action. We are in the 21st century, in a new period of it now.
That's a very good point, a very good way to look at it. I would just add to that and I guess ask you, does it change your perspective of it too? Because we have 2 players now that are bona fide superstars, multi-major champions, Alcaraz with 4, Sinner with 2. So in addition to, as I agree, the tectonic shift of no big three winning, you have 2 worthy, great champions coming up.
Oh, no question. They're great. They're terrific. And that's a nice thing for, let's say, a promoter or someone involved. It's to think, good, look, and now we have 2 guys who are, they can be the new whatever. And there'll be some article that'll say, oh, look at the similarities and contrasts between Alcaraz and Sinner, to kind of Rafa Roger, Borg McEnroe, whatever with them. But I tend to kind of resist that. I don't like I don't like it. Is there a new big three? I mean, for example, we've heard in the WTA desire for there doesn't have to be a big three of anything. It's not like this is a category. This isn't a carved in stone assignation that exists. And I would have no problem
Mhm.
if the last 8 majors had been won by 8 different men. That would be okay too. They're
It would
all that would be fine too. That to me, I don't judge it. To me, history is indifferent in thinking, oh, this is good for tennis because we had multi-slam winners. This is bad for tennis because we had 8. It's all part of the game.
yeah. I think you're saying that just good tennis is good for tennis. Like as long as the action's good, it's good.
Well, the winners then become the winners, and then they're anointed, right?
Yeah.
Once upon a time, everybody's nobody, and then somebody wins a slam, and it's like, wow, this guy's a great player. He was
Right.
pretty great before he won that slam.
How much do you attribute personality to a piece of the puzzle? Because I remember the last time you were on the show, you mentioned how a lot of the modern game is owed to Jimmy Connors. He was electric. It wasn't just the tennis though that brought everybody in. So I think seeing some personalities emerge from these players that are winning majors, how big of a piece of the puzzle is that, the personality side?
I think that's a very interesting part of it, and I think it'll be interesting in the years to come, given the way the media milieu is looking. And I don't just mean tennis; I mean media overall. What does it mean? How do we begin to understand who these athletes are and how they behave and who they are? And that's going to become more difficult in the years to come. A lot of athletes, they take control of their content,
Yeah.
which in a way is exciting, but in another way is are potentially deceptive, right? Because it's like we don't. They're owning they're publishers in their own right,
Mhm.
and that's kind of neat in a way. But there's something a little less as a journalist. I find that a little concerning. I'm a little concerned. I really would like to know Yannick Sinner on my terms, not his terms.
Yeah, I actually had that written down. We're on the same wavelength because I was going to ask you, and I still plan to, about the media landscape and your, thoughts on it. But the player side's huge because I'm torn on the outside too because I appreciate getting to know certain aspects about players and them having a voice they didn't have. But yeah, the terms is a good way to put it. It's also how can we know objectively? And I understand that there could be, journalists that don't look fairly. Unfortunately, that does happen too. But yes, sometimes controlling the narrative, maybe, especially when something happens that you want to look at from a clean slate. The narrative is the ball is, for lack of a better term, in the player's courts. And I don't know if that's, like you said,
That's
always the case.
well, at least with a sport, unlike other endeavors, other art forms or politics or business, at least in a sport, to me, and this was true with Jimmy Connors too, at least 51% of how I understand someone comes inside the lines. It's
Mm,
about the music, it's about the game. And so the other stuff, like what they say, I'm not looking for them to sound clever. I don't need them to sound clever. I need to understand the sounds is what they do with the rackets. So my mission is to understand what makes them really good at tennis. That's why I'd rather interview coaches than
yeah,
sponsors.
that's
Not
a
their coaches, even other coaches.
yeah.
I want to talk with other coaches. For example, I think it's great. I mean, this is very, very tennis weedy like. Talk to a coach about what's the implication of Sinner changing his serve from the platform to the pinpoint. And what's that about? And what's that mean for his game? And also, what's it take to make that kind of change at that level? He's already a top 10 player. How do you make that change? And that interests me. That interests me more than Yannick Sinner going to an art show or appearing on a sitcom or whatever. That kind of thing, because that to me is going to reveal how the game is played and how he conducts his craft.
It certainly does, especially given how long the season is, what you might be sacrificing to make that long-term commitment
Right.
in the short term.
Right.
So,
And he did. And he put some time into it. And of course, him, he's so good. It's like it barely it'd be interesting to almost trace the development time to then the
yeah,
performance time because
yeah,
he's like he's like a 747. I just dated myself,
yeah.
but he's a jet, man. He's fantastic.
55-5 on the season this year, so not bad, not bad at
Six
all.
titles, I think. Is that right?
Yeah,
Six
yeah.
tournaments. Yeah, just great.
It's remarkable. The last piece on this, Joel, I did want to ask you in terms of the history and where we're going forward, and hopefully the new frontier with tennis, but the rivalry side of things. So, in your history, in your estimation, how valuable is it to have some rivalries at the top of the sport where the fans that could kind of settle in, and expect some good matches when the very top play each other.
Rivalries are neat. I mean, we enjoy them. We enjoy them for the contrast of styles. For at the very peak, they're vying for the bone of winning a major. We're not as engaged by rivalries between players, let's say 8 and 12. I mean, I'm not hearing someone talk about the Demonor Dimitrov rivalry. It's not a right. I mean, what we really mean by that is like battles for the really grand goodies. People meeting in semis and later in majors, not even quarters. I mean, for example, they've Taylor Fritz and Zverev have had some good matches and at some late stage, and that's an intriguing rivalry of sorts. And then Sinner and Alcaraz and Swiatek and Sabalenka.
Mm-hmm.
That's a
Yeah,
rivalry.
yeah.
Good.
It's very interesting when you get great players to play, and sometimes I've thought about this too, but not every match is going to be a classic. But if you get a real classic sprinkled in there, it can kind of cloud how we look at the rivalry. Like all it takes is one classic, and we're like, this is the best rivalry ever.
Well, it takes one you get one classic, and then that nourishes you for the next 5
Yeah.
4 and 4s, and that's okay. But then it creates the expectation. I think a rivalry is not necessarily always how great the match plays out, as much as your expectation of what the match could be. I mean, I watched 2 rivals once who played a lot of close matches, and this one of the guys won handily, but you still kind of saw the brilliance of the one tuning the other. That's to be interesting too.
Certainly can. Joel Drucker here on Tennis Channel Inside In. I wanted to ask you about, as we're topical, this is going to be released after the Laver Cup, but Laver Cup's been going on for 7 years now. We just had the newest, I should say, iteration of the Davis Cup, where there's a lot going on to get to the final round, which will take place in a few months. But Joel, if you look at team events, and I know you're someone that came up in an era when the Davis Cup meant so much, where are we at with the state of team events right now? The schedule is brutally long. We know this. Exhibitions are added to the list for the very top players. But as far as team events, where do you think we are right now?
I'm waiting for the ITF to discuss and share with us its plan for Davis Cup. I had thought that 2024 was going to be the last year of the existing format, and there was going to be some discussion of the ITF about how to make the format yet better reformed. I haven't heard that. I hope that emerges in some shape or form. If not for 2025, because nothing's been announced, perhaps then with hopes of 26. In the meantime, the Laver Cup, which I wrote a story about this week, has really kind of captured it's kind of an all-star game. What is it? It's kind of an all-star game. It's kind of an exhibition. It's got competition. But for 7 years in, I mean, you got to hand it. I mean, Roger Federer, along with his manager Tony Godsick, talk about the Midas touch. I mean, the Laver Cup, and it's moving into a new era. It realizes this is the post-Big Three era, and next year there are going to be new captains in Yannick Noah for Team Europe and Andre Agassi for Team World. And Laver Cup, it just it keeps rolling along. I mean, it's pretty interesting. I think Roger is now 42. Why wouldn't he play? Maybe some year play a doubles match.
Did you see the video? Did you see the video of him practicing today?
I haven't seen that. Oh my God, no, I haven't seen that one yet. I'm sure he's
not
cool
bad.
as ever. He's
not bad.
He's just got it going, man. Roger Federer, man. Anything he touches, right?
Yeah, I'm glad that it's become, I think, the perfect hybrid, as you said, between all-star game and exhibition, because the players want to be there. The most surprising thing with the Laver Cup for me, Joel, is that you hear guys like Alcaraz in the very top say, "Oh, it's good competition. We're in it to win it." That's where I'm like, okay, maybe this does have staying power, because not only are they showing up, but they want to show up and show out. So
no, they want to win, and it's individual sports, so it's not like an NBA All-Star game where we're passing the ball around and people are scoring. And oh, by the way, the East won, as much as you're playing matches. And I think I want to meet that person who came up with that scoring system where the matches were weighted differently each day. That was genius. I mean, that brings some. The only thing that I feel bad about, I feel bad for someone. I think it was Casper Ruud one year. He won on the opening day. He won a match handily. He scored a point. It's like he scores a single point for the team, and then but the guys who you want to be known as Mr. Sunday. You don't want to be known as Mr. Friday at Laver Cup. You want to be known as Mr. Sunday in these matches. That's 3 points. That's pretty good.
Yeah, you want to get to that Tiger Woods level of just owning it on Sunday. And I would like to see the Davis Cup kind of be back in the culture, the tennis culture, because
Oh,
I wasn't around for it. You were around for like the pinnacle of it when it meant so much, the national pride, the level of tennis, and just how
glad you
exciting.
brought that up because I got something here for you. I got a prop
All right,
here. This is
all right.
from the 1999 Davis Cup, the 100th centenary. The U.S. is playing Australia in Longwood, where they played the first Davis Cup in the
Wow.
Boston area. And this is my credential for July. By the way, it felt like it was about 120 degrees that weekend. And the 18-year-old Leighton Hewitt kind of kicked things off with a great win over Todd Martin, and that was kind of the ascent of Leighton. And there was a great it was the U.S. and Australia playing. John Newcomb and Tony Roach coaching for Australia. Pete Sampras playing doubles. All past American Davis Cuppers were there, so there was a great dinner at the Kennedy Museum that weekend. So yeah, there have been times when Davis Cup was at least somewhat front and center. I mean, pre-open era, it was even more so. I mean, I won't get into this on this show, but I don't know if you know this, Mitch, but the four majors are that way because of Davis Cup. Those are the
Mm,
four nations that had won Davis Cup. That's why
wow,
they are the Grand Slam nations. That's why
wow, that
those four
is
nations. We won't get into it on this show, but I'll tell you some other thing. That's why the Davis Cup, let's say pre-open era, it was even more significant.
wow. I mean, yeah, I guess that does make sense. I mean, my upbringing in tennis, I understood obviously the United States and Australia's dominance there, but yeah, I guess historically you look back to what the UK and what France have done. I
Well,
just like
they were when the whole concept of Grand Slam originated in the 1930s. It was
Mhm.
because those were the national titles of the only four nations that had won Davis Cup.
Wow. Wow, it's special, and it's special too. I mean, we haven't said his name, but hearing Novak Djokovic say, "Look, I'm focused on Grand Slams, but I'm also focused on representing Serbia any chance I can, including Davis Cup." I mean, the significance of that, Joel, is the guy who's done everything, had the year he's had, and he's going to play in a Davis Cup match so Serbia doesn't get relegated. I don't think that should be lost on the public. What playing for his country?
That was successful. Well, look what this year for Novak. The most important thing for him by far was the Olympics. And
Yeah.
let's also look back at the end of 2010. Novak was ranked number 3 in the world, and Serbia wins the Davis Cup. In a way, that effort helped propel him to his
Hmm.
subsequent decade of greatness. Because then in 2011 was when he became number 1 in the world. And I think the inspiration he drew from that, the meaning for him of representing Serbia, is exceptionally profound.
Maybe Sinner too. Last year beats Djokovic, wins Davis Cup, and then goes to Australia. So
Exactly. That's right. So, well, there have been cases. This happened with John McEnroe. Happened with Bjorn Borg, where Davis Cup effort then propels the player to his
yeah.
next phase of greatness.
I'm with it. I'm with it. Well, that's just one thing I want to mention on the team concept. Unfortunately, there is some some sad news in the tennis world. I wanted to ask you about this, but Robert Lansdorp, the legendary coach who worked with so many of the great champions, too many to list, but just a few of them: Lindsay Davenport, Pete Sampras, Tracy Austin, who said that he was the best teacher of ground strokes that she'd ever seen. And I'll take Tracy's word on a lot of things tennis related, but you got to write a piece on him. You spent some time with him. 85
Spent a
is
week with him once. I spent a week with him
yeah.
in 2005 for a piece, and I watched him teach. And I also, in my own junior days in Southern California, played some of the Lansdorp students. They were way, way better. And he was a lord of discipline on the ground strokes. And the Jesuits have a saying. They say, give me a child for the first 6 years and you can have him for the rest. And Robert Lansdorp was, I think he'd say that about a tennis player. Let me teach him the ground strokes, you can have the rest. I don't know if Robert Lansdorp even liked watching tennis matches as much as he loved helping people work hard. And his 20 ball drill and the players, the toughness that they had. The four you mentioned who all became number 1 in the world, dozens others who made it to pro tennis, probably hundreds who played college tennis. I
Mhm.
mean, and also very much, tennis, a friend and I say, is kind of like the Star Wars bar. It's filled with all these interesting personalities from all over the galaxy. And Robert was one of them. He had the gruff side, but beneath it, he was a soft, caring man who cared deeply about his students.
It's great to hear so many established people give him his flowers. And it's just remarkable what he's been able to do. It also brings up another point, Joel, that we're seeing is that you could be the greatest athlete, you can have a dynamic game, but having that technical basis that Lansdorp put in place with all these players, that just unlocks everything. And when you don't have it, it's like impossible to get later in your career. So props to him for really setting the table for all these legendary
There
careers.
isn't a career. There isn't a career if you don't have it. I
Yeah.
mean, it's like knowing nouns and verbs and commas and periods. I mean, there isn't a career, and the discipline he imparted, the hard work his students put in, the kind of specific way he wanted them to hit the ball, the confidence he had. I mean, I think his point is, I taught you, we learned, we worked on this arsenal. Hit the ball you've been taught to hit.
Yeah.
And they weren't going for it. That's for example, I've in the last couple of years, I don't use that term anymore. Lindsay Davenport was never going for it. She was hitting the shot she practiced to hit a million times, and it was a beautiful, beautiful swing and stroke. Just fantastic.
That muscle memory was just installed in them. It's great. And yeah, there is, like you say, there's no career if you don't have the technical basis. But I would also say it's like a metaphor of other careers. Great coaches probably look around when you become a great coach. When you become a coach, you look at it and say, there's some coaching that maybe isn't up to snuff. So when you get a coach at that level in your corner, it's just remarkable. So again, props to him. And we talked about it too, like the way that coaching is nowadays. And maybe I'll ask you, I could be off base here, Joel, but do you think that there's been more coaching changes? There's been shorter partnerships than in the past? Because from my vantage point,
That's an interesting question. I think what it is, the dynamic of the player, the whole role of the player team. Once upon a time, there weren't coaches at all. There wasn't money. There wasn't infrastructure. They had instructors who they'd work with back home. Then, starting with Bjorn Borg, you started to see a traveling coach. But it was still pretty much kind of a one-on-one concept. In the last, 7 to 10 years, the player is now a CEO. The players, it's not just the player and the coach. It's not just Brad, Gilbert, Andre, and let's say Gil Reyes. There's a physio, there's a trainer, there might be a psychologist. You got the parental involvement. So the players become the CEO of a team. And where does the tennis expert fit into it? Is he necessarily the head coach? Is he the consultant? Is he who captures the player's mind? Who's at the executive management table? And so I think there's more volatility in that world, and a coach in that world. Robert Lansdorp was different. Robert Lansdorp was a foundational coach. He didn't travel that often with his players. He was more foundational and helped them really learn how to hit the ball. The coaches who go with players now, let's say like as Brad did with Coco, that's a different role. You're in competition, you're at tournaments, so it's game day all the time. That's different than off weeks where you're putting in training blocks and refining skills. So I think there's definitely more volatility and uncertainty. And then there's also, now we have this mid-match coaching, which I think is, I was never in favor, but it could never be policed. So the cat's out of the bag. I don't like the way it exists at pro tennis now. I think it makes a sport look rinky-dink to have a coach on one side of the court yelling across fans. Can you imagine Bill Belichick doing that? Say, hey, Brady, I can only talk to you from this side. And 82Z. 82Z, and he's yelling across fans, and players say they can't often hear the guy. I mean, that makes tennis look so bush league.
Yeah, it is odd, right? Like I never really thought of it, but if you're gonna enable coaching, why not just have them on the side, like on the sideline? Like I don't,
Yeah.
Yeah,
If you're gonna do it. And by the way, I want that coach and the player walking out there to spin the racket. I want the name on that player, on that coach's back. I want him to do an automatic press conference like in the team sports. I want a full bio on him. I want to know who this guy is thoroughly. I don't need to hear him mic'd up. I don't need to hear all of those interactions. I know that can be engaging entertainment, but I don't want I don't want to hear you talking to my coach, talking to my coach on changeover. That's our dialogue. But professionalize it the way it is now. I am really, and also now with the players, they're all trying to figure out, how does this really work well? Do we talk during the point? Do we talk after points? Do we talk on changeovers? Because all the players have it now weren't raised that way.
Right.
So now it's like this new thing you have in matches.
The fine line for me would be, you can get a benefit of it, but if it if you rely on coaching too much or something happens that throws you off course, and we've seen this, right? We don't have to name names, but it can capitulate a lot. Like all of a sudden, you don't know what to do. You're overwhelmed, and you're relying on coaching that either isn't helping or goes against it. So that would be the one thing too that I think there
But
could
we
be an
don't know.
overwhelm.
In the team
Yeah.
sports, we kind of get the deal. The basketball coach,
Uh-huh.
he throws you out there, you're playing, and he kind of yelling sometimes. They're used to it, and they spent their whole life being around it. That too, if you grow up playing basketball, you have that the whole time from when you're 10. You got a coach, he's yelling at the team. That's not true in tennis.
Yeah.
That's not true in tennis. I don't. I think it would be kind of jarring. You don't grow up in juniors having someone, speaking to you during points. It may come to junior tennis, but it's not there now.
Well, Joel, I want to ask you too about the honor coming up here, September 27th, the date, Northern California Tennis Hall of Fame. I know in your perspective, you've been immersed in the tennis world and been a pillar for so long, but it's a tremendous honor. It's well deserved. Does it make you kind of look at your career in retrospect a little bit and take a step back to look at the bigger picture of all the things you've accomplished?
Of course it does, and it's very nice. It's a great honor. I feel very grateful to the committee that make that happen. I'm very much looking forward to seeing a lot of my friends in Northern California. Yes, it does make me see things in perspective. I've seen things in perspective a lot, but this, of course, brings it into a whole other kind of perspective. So it's very exciting. I'll tell you a quote that I'm going to use in my speech as a teaser. My late older brother, when I was 12 and had been playing tennis for 6 months, I read something in a magazine about a player and a data point, and I said, "Hey, guess what? It's this player's birthday tomorrow." Something I was reading in one of my tennis books, and he goes, "If you play tennis a little more than you read about it or talked about it, you might be a good player one day." And I thought to myself, well, and that has made all the difference. I play tennis as I play tennis, and my path became this path, and it's kind of exciting, and I'm very grateful for the honor.
I think one of the things your story and countless others shows is that if you have a dream within tennis and you get, the bug, as we say, not all dreams are, and not all dreams should or will obviously lead to being a pro tennis player. There's a lot of outstanding careers like yourself in media, even getting to college, getting into coaching. So there's so many different ways that people can realize their dreams in tennis, and yours is one example of that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's not, well, look, and I never had a dream of being a pro tennis player. I enjoyed playing tennis and I played tournaments, but that wasn't really in my thing. My thing was about school and I liked writing papers. I didn't think about writing about tennis until I was almost out of college, and there are other ebbs and flows. But yeah, I mean, like I said to someone, William Faulkner had the South and I have tennis.
That's a good one too. That's a good quote too. Joel Drucker, this has been a great chat. Before I let you go, I got two quick ones for you. They're kind of open-ended questions, so I'm going to kick it to you with these questions. One being, as a historian, if I was going to be like a younger person, a tennis fan that wants to know more about their history, where would you point them to? What's like a match or a storyline or just something that you say, okay, you want to learn about tennis in the past? This is where I'm going to direct you first.
First, the one thing that came to mind is Steve Flink's great book, The Greatest Matches in Tennis History. That's a start. That's, I think, about 30, 35 great matches with backstories and after stories. So that's a good starting point to kind of take in the sweep of the game. And then that's a start. And I would say, yeah, you can't read enough about the game. And I think I'm a big advocate. If someone wants to write about tennis, they need to read about tennis. They need to study it, and they need to read things, and there's content on the International Tennis Hall of Fame site. There's all sorts of content available. There's books. There's a zillion books written about tennis that you can read. Yeah, that's right. And don't stop. And don't stop. You can always keep learning.
It's always about progress. I love that. And Joel, the last question I have. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, second question. Let's hear it.
Second question is, this is the last one. I put you in charge. What are we changing? What are you trying to adjust in tennis in 2024 right now if you ran the show?
Oh, God, I should have anticipated this because I worked on a tennis channel show and we used to do that. What do I do? Oh, Oh, I like the thing Billie Jean King said this recently. Names on the back of shirts.
I
How's
like
that for
that.
you? Names on
That's
the back of shirts. And you wear it the whole friggin' tournament so that when I walk out to practice court 14, I know who that is. And I don't need to check the app to see who's practicing on court 14. Names on the back of the shirts. That's step one towards players connecting more with fans. That's a big macro topic that you and I could talk about for another 4 hours, but we won't now. But names on the back of shirts. How about that?
I like that. Joel Drucker is a podcast host, a writer, a historian, but also a marketer too. So we just keep learning, keep doing better. So I think that's a great idea. Any way to grow the game. Joel,
Definitely.
you've been a tremendous guest. I appreciate the time. Anytime we get to chat here on the show. Again, congratulations on the honor, September 27th, Northern California Tennis Hall of Fame inductee. Joel Drucker, always a blast. Thanks for coming on Tennis Channel Inside In.
Thank you, Mitch.